चिदानंद जी आप अनम्यूट कर सकते
स्वामी जी शुरू कर सकते हैं।
हैं, अनम्यूट करके।
have not unmuted. Yeah. I was asking Sanjay Balchandran, are you the same person who was once in Rajghat? You have to unmute. I was asking without unmuting.
Yes, Swamiji, I am the same. I don't know if I am the same person, but the body is the same. I don't know. Even the body has changed, but yes, we are the same.
That's true. That part is true. Yeah, of course, we did meet in Kolkata, I guess, once afterwards.
Once. Yes, Swamiji. Yes, we did.
So, do you continue in Kolkata now?
Yes, Swamiji, I am in Kolkata.
All right. Yeah. Yes, Sushil Kumar Jain.
Yes, sir.
Please
you
fire
can
the
start.
shots. Okay.
You can start.
Good evening, namaste, everybody. Happiness, life's elusive goal. Happiness eludes us. It's also an illusion. That's a different word. Here we are not calling it an illusion. Here we are saying it is elusive. That means even as we think we are about to get it, it as though slips from between our fingers. It eludes us. We are not able to lay our hands upon it. So happiness is life's elusive goal. From the cradle to the grave, everybody seems to be seeking happiness. Some do it in what we call very gross ways, eat, drink, and make merry, and others do it in what is regarded some higher taste, finer tastes, refined tastes of life through music, through art. Then there are others who seek happiness in power, in positions. However, is this happiness at all that is sought and acquired? If there is a seeking, which is an act of thought, our mind seeks happiness. It visualizes, if I get such and such thing, if I get such and such person, if I get such and such place or object or property, etc., I think I will be happy. And sure enough, when we get that kind of person as our boss, as our spouse, as our teammate, as something, we do enjoy. For a while, we celebrate. Something happens to us. We tell all our friends, I'm so happy to get this 4-bedroom house in this posh locality of this big city. We do use the word happiness. Of course, there are lots of people who use language rather carelessly. For everything they say, I am happy. Let us ignore those people. It's not only with regard to the word happiness or happy, but with regard to the words like love, with regard to words like proud, guilty, shame, ashamed, with regard to many words, those either because they don't know the English or any other language well. This is not a problem with English alone. In any language, there are people who use certain words without thinking what they are actually talking. And either they don't know or they are under the illusion that there is something about which they have to be happy, or something about which they have to be proud, only to realize a little while later that it was a wrong conclusion on their part. The those who use a word without knowing proper meaning of it are a different category. But those who use the word sincerely believing that they are happy, in other words, they are not using the word in ignorance. They use the word with the conviction that they are indeed happy. For them, this happiness perhaps is more elusive than to anybody else, because they are the people who sincerely believed something that they got has now made them happy, and then they realize that, oh, not quite, as there is an expression, almost but not quite. So, what is this happiness? As we dig deeper, as we take the word with utmost care, what is true happiness? And when we do so with utmost care, we certainly distinguish happiness from pleasure. It is easy to come upon pleasure. Pleasure, of course, is more easy to recognize. In pleasure, in the pursuit of pleasure, and in experiencing pleasure, there are some concrete dimensions or aspects. Thought operates, thought visualizes things, and those things come to one's possession or one's experience. And as expected, there is another thought now which is marked by great enjoyment. No wonder in the mad, mad world outside, which you and I only have created, let's not run away from the responsibility. In this mad world, this word happiness is used as a marketing strategy, as an advertising tool. If you say, buy our product and ensure happiness for all your life, that would be a very good advertising line. All other products give you happiness for a short while. Buy our soap, buy our toothpaste, or buy our car. You will be happy for a very long time, or as long as is possible. Even in places like Disneyland, there would be in huge letters written at the entrance, right at the entrance, welcome to the happiest place on the earth. Of course, those who are smart in the commercial world not only use this word happiness with gusto, with a lot of pomp, but they also work hard to provide to their clients or customers such a variety, such a spectrum of things that if anybody is unhappy, they should rather blame themselves than the supplier of those objects. Like Disneyland, I visited only once, and honestly, even if you give me a free ticket, I'm in no mood to go once more over there. For on one hand, it was so enjoyable, but on the other, we come out tired. Well, this was nice, worth seeing once, but I won't go there again, is the feeling generally that adults would have. So they go to any extent, those who produce chocolates, ice creams, etc. Now, I don't want to go more into the world of advertisement, nor am I qualified to do so. But we are clear from the point of view of philosophy. I'm using the word philosophy in the sense of love of truth. As you know, philo means love and Sophia means truth. Philosophy is love of truth. We want to explore what the truth of the matter is. What truly is happiness? As we go deeply into this issue, it is seen that happiness is something where if we seek it, that very seeking comes in the way of coming upon happiness. Seeking means a thought is supported, conceiving is supported, imagining, visualizing, and all this actually erects the self. Self, that is a sense of me. This me is incomplete without that car, and with that car, this me would be complete. That kind of imagination, fancy, that kind of conclusion, that kind of belief, whatever you may call it, is in place. And typically, when one gets that car about which one imagined that it would bring happiness, one becomes quote and unquote happy for a while. But we regard it in philosophical terms pleasure only. Pleasure is marked by gratification. So, philosophically, in pleasure, there is actually a self deception. We imagine that we would be complete if we get something, and the way it works is when we get that, there is a quietening of thought, there is a quietening of certain unrest which was earlier present. That makes us believe that, indeed, this object gave me happiness. This person is 24 karat happiness, etc. So we delude ourselves. Though a thousand times, if not more, in life, we learn the lesson the very hard way, and yet we forget. At the most, we stop chasing one kind of object, only we replace it with another chase. We chase another kind of object. We are no more after good cars, but we might be after nice houses, or we might be after name and fame. Alas, all this in simplest language is mischief of thought. Thought is operating, and it is rightly said by mystics like our own Krishnaji, happiness is not when one seeks it. Happiness comes when there is no seeking. That to me points to something that is very natural, very innate, and I would therefore think of it in this way. True happiness is uncaused. If ice cream causes it, then it is pleasure, not happiness. If a four-bedroom house in a posh colony, I declare, brought me happiness, it was not happiness, it was pleasure. Ice cream or house or a medal or a trophy, a title, this or that, if those things cause certain sense of being well, that is pleasure. So, are we making matters very complicated by saying this happiness is uncaused? I think most of you have read the chapter in Pupul Jaikar's biography of Sri J. Krishnamurti. Probably that chapter is published as a separate booklet also. Happy is the man who owns nothing. That is a baffling statement to people in general. Even to those of us who talk about all these things, this statement stares in our eyes and challenges us. It asks us, dare to have nothing. And many a time we find to have nothing at all is a scary thought. For we are so much caught by the tentacles of thought that we already are visualizing possessing something and becoming happy. Some of us who are a bit scholarly wish to possess all books of wisdom and wish to have knowledge contained in those books. Speakers like me, in our own foolishness, want to be able to speak on anything, and we want to own that kind of knowledge. We want to own information on our fingertips. No wonder we are also unhappy in our own way. But somewhere in in between meaning, in the middle of this mad chase of happiness and what we may call knocking on wrong doors all the time, either out of utter tiredness or perhaps to be more precise, out of certain, what we call it in Indian terminology, sattva guna. Sattva is a certain state of fine balance, whereas Rajoguna and Tamoguna are the words used in Indian philosophy for trying to grab something, trying to own something, trying to possess something, trying to have something, somebody, or some place as ours. This is mine. Don't you dare touch it, etc. That is supposed to be Rajoguna, and the worst is Tamoguna, where there is no true judgment at all, where one misjudges, where one mistakes night for day and mistakes day for night, right for wrong and wrong for right, enemies for friends and friends for enemies, etc. That is called Tamoguna. One thinks one is very active while actually one is wasting one's time. That kind of wrong judgment in many, many contexts is the hallmark of Tamoguna. But we are interested in Sattva. If we get something which we had wanted, then there is, let's say, a quietude of mind. That is pleasure. That's not happiness. In true happiness, which I already said is of the nature of being uncaused, that means it is natural. And I was glancing at some writings of Krishnaji. Somewhere he has said, true happiness is born of purity. It is a loveliness of being, and this happiness comes when you are not seeking it, when you are not seeking it. And there is also an associated question with this happiness. If this happiness comes when we do not seek it, then will it be a contradiction for you and me to be engaged in any activity, including such dialogues, discussions, or what we call education? Krishnaji and all of us hold education as one of the best engagements possible in human life, more than business, more than those 100 other occupations. Education we regard as a field where there is, in a sense, prospect of maximum learning about the self among the students, and with the students and others being like a mirror, uh, we get to see ourselves too. we get to see the self in others, the self in ourselves, in the framework of education, possibly more than in any other field. So I will raise this question and share my 2 cents on it and then conclude my sharing. Krishnaji has raised the question somewhere, can educators go about their work concerned with education at the same time being open to this pure happiness? He calls it creative happiness. And he uses words like, there is a certain source of happiness. Do we do we miss that source of happiness the moment we get into any engagement, including education? And the good news is Krishnaji himself answers that question. He says, not necessary. An educator can be engaged in the process of education, teaching science or history, economics or mathematics, whatever. An educator can be engaged in the processes of education, and those processes don't have to come in the way of this creative happiness, provided there is this provided this educator is educated enough to be in touch with that source. That was very thought provoking to me myself. And what it means to me, if I may share how I think about it, is no matter in what activity we are engaged, education or the practice of law, practice of medicine, or maybe running a little shop, or being um, someone who looks after trees, someone who looks after gardens, someone is into some other activity. No matter where we are, it seems to be an interesting and inspiring challenge to be in touch with the source of happiness. And in the simplest language, it seems to mean that we may jolly well engage with the smaller issue, with the specific issues, with the specific scenarios of life. We may jolly well be engaged. There is no harm. Rather, life will make us get involved in family matters, institutional matters, national matters, societal matters. Somewhere we do get involved. And it seems that getting involved in this or that activity by itself is not the issue. While we are engaged in the finite, in the limited, in the specific, is it possible for us to be aware of the unspecific, the unbounded, the unlimited, that which is not defined at all? Looks like that is the challenge. So, especially as educators, if one can be in touch with silence, even as one is amidst noise, if one can be in touch with the expanse, even as one is outwardly sitting inside a small room, and so on. So, in one sentence, there is a challenge of our mind having to be in touch with something that has no boundaries. And being in touch with that with no boundaries, if we involve and engage in those which have many walls and many boundaries and many descriptions and many specifics, there is no harm, there is no danger at all. Therefore, happiness, which is not a matter of there being a cause and this being a result of it, it's not a matter of there being an object and that becomes the source of happiness, etc. The source here is totally different. Not a person, not a place, not an object, not a degree, not a trophy, not a recognition, and so on. A different source where one one can get in touch with it by letting go rather than seeking to hold. These seem to be some of the thoughts which challenge us, even as all of us are desirous of happiness. Happiness drives us every moment in our life. Let me pause here, having shared some thoughts, and I request my friends Harshji, Harshadji, and others to add and even maybe edit some of what I have said. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chidanand. But we want question answer session.
Oh,
First
yeah.
question answer and then.
Before they forget what I had spoken, that's
Sorry.
in a way it's better. A speaker speaks and people have something about, they have just then heard, so they can ask and finish the question. That's right.
By raising hand only. By raising hand. Or writing it in chat box.
Sanjay raised his hand. There is a software way of raising hand also. Somewhere there's a button. Then against your screen, one yellow hand comes up. You raised your hand in the against the camera. But this is blue today. So someone will read, I guess, his question. Will Sushilji do that, or am I supposed to do that?
Sir, I have been unmuted, sir, so I can directly ask the question.
Please do.
Yeah. So Swamiji, my question was that you have spoken about all those things. When you spoke, I noticed that you spoke about all the things that happiness is not, and you made a distinction between happiness and pleasure. So my question was, can you shed some light on what happiness is? Does it have any defining qualities at all?
Yes. In fact, I do agree partially with what you have said and not fully, because at one point I quoted Krishnaji as referring to happiness on one hand as born of purity, and on the other coming closer to almost pointing out what it is. He said it's a loveliness of being. It's a loveliness of being, not the loveliness of arriving somewhere. Generally we are very eager to arrive somewhere. Generally we are very eager to possess something. We hold the trophy and say, I got it. We take the keys of that 4-bedroom house and say, now I am the owner of this house. We get, let us say, Padma Bhushan, and openly or secretly in our mind we say, finally I am a Padma Award winner. Wow. So that's all arriving. In contrast, Krishnaji has said, it is a loveliness of being. I would add, though he meant it, it is a loveliness of being where we really don't care about arriving, about possessing. So that's again negation, I agree. But the non-negating, assertive or affirmative way of putting it is only this loveliness of being. It cannot be, I guess, expressed in a more or in a positive language. Even some expressions which seem to be positive, like if you say it's a vast expanse, looks like, language-wise, it looks like a positive word. But what is a vast expanse? Absence of boundaries. So that is negation. Where there are no boundaries, there is negation. This language plays a trick there.
But you did speak of engaging in boundaries while I mean, psychologically you're free of that boundary, but you engage in your activities which are necessarily bound.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So boundaries need not be such a bad thing. In fact, without boundaries, we would not be able to function in any relationship.
True, true,
Mm.
true. So look at the mountain, but be aware of the whole expanse of the sky. Look at a little cat running on the green lawns, but be aware of the lawns too. Something like that. The specifics are like the little cat, and the unbounded the dimension is the the green grass. And I also mentioned noise and silence, conflict and harmony. Tomorrow you and I could run into a conflict in some matter. We may have a very big difference of opinion, and yet suppose you and I, preferably hopefully both of us, never lose sight of how great friends we have been all these years. Today a topic has come which seems to tear us apart. But if we hold in our consciousness, let's say, I'm just giving some figures, 20
Swamiji,
years friendship.
Swamiji, I have to interrupt you here.
Sure, please do.
Supposing we take the opposite, that you and I have been enemies for the last 20 years. If I hold that, so holding implies memory, implies the past, implies an image. So if
Correct.
supposing you and I have been enemies for the last 20 years, and today there is suddenly an opening, if I hold that, then that contradicts what you're saying here.
In fact, that 20 years enmity
Hmm.
has to reduce to something negligible if we open up to the vastness this morning. Suppose over a cup of tea, you and I, through a dialogue or whatever, suddenly realize the vastness of life. Then 20 years would reduce to 20 seconds. It would not, because this loveliness of being has that capacity to reduce what appeared heavy to something insignificant. That's how I could visualize. I'm visualizing and speaking. Please don't think I'm experiencing it right now. I have my burdens, as most of you have your burdens. Yeah, over to anyone else. Nice question, Sanjay.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Dinesh Wagmare, please unmute and ask.
Sir, there are 4 words. One is pleasure, another is joy, another is happiness, and another one is bliss. So how we can differentiate between them?
See, all these 4 words, pleasure, joy, happiness, bliss, someone may add ecstasy, someone may add, some others, there are so many. Finally, what matters is how one understands those words, each of them. Sometimes somebody might be just changing the word without in his mind visualizing anything different. Speakers and writers generally follow a rule not to repeat the same word. So they put a new word, but it's a big question whether the writer or the speaker really has something else in his mind or going by the rule just mechanically. Oh, I already used this word. Let me use another word. Let me look from thesaurus. Let me put a synonym. In this way, if one does, that's a very unfortunate affair. If the writer or the speaker actually looks at it and says, no, it's not exactly what I mean. I'll use another word which will represent better what I have been trying to say, then it's good. Now, coming directly to your question, I would only supply a criterion among 4, 6, or 10 words that we may have before us, whichever is less and less caused by an external acquisition is closer to happiness. Whichever is more and more caused by acquiring something gross or subtle is closer to pleasure. So that makes happiness and pleasure two camps. And a number of words, which could be some kind of synonyms, would either belong to this camp or that camp, depending on whether they are natural, uncaused, innate, being by themselves, or they are caused, produced, brought about, and there is an involvement, a role played by memory and thought. You know, there is a labeling process. You know, I look at the object I got and say, ah, this exactly is what I wanted. Because my neighbor had it, I wanted to have it, and now I got a little bigger one than my neighbor. This is called the labeling and engaging thought. You know, thought gets in and compares. The neighbor had brought a TV 24 4 inches diagonal, and I got it. My wife and I went and bought one. This is 28 inches. I'm so happy we have a bigger one. This is the wicked operation of thought. More than the real worth of the TV, that comparison. We have a bigger TV than the neighbor and so on. This goes on in individuals, in religious communities, in professional communities, in nationalistic, groups. You know, so that's the sad history of humanity. So let me conclude saying, have these two camps, have these two boxes: happiness, pleasure. Happiness is marked by no particular cause, no particular interference of thought. Pleasure is marked by interference of thought. Thought has a say in it. Thought actually decides whether you are pleased or not pleased.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So if there is no other question, we may
Yeah.
go to
Harshad Parik,
second.
Harshad Parik, sir.
Harshadji,
Harshad Parik, sir.
I'm eager to hear Harshadji's views.
Yeah. Okay. Are you able to hear my voice?
Very
Yes,
well.
sir.
Yes. Okay. In my one culture class, I asked students, what is the most important thing in your life? And one girl answered, family. So I asked her, why family? So she said that family brings happiness. So I said that the happiness is more important than the family, because in many families, there is no happiness. There are many conflicts, many problems in the family. So happiness, from where does it come? But let us look at this elusive goal that yes, everybody wants to be happy in this world, but the way we live, it creates unhappiness because we don't have the clarity about where is the source of happiness. Unhappiness comes from desire to get this or that. So there is one simple sentence which says, I want happiness. If you remove I, which is the most difficult thing, then the want also goes. So only happiness remains. And there are simple ways of creating happiness. Generally, if happiness comes from outside, like family or money or a relationship or power, fame, it doesn't stay long. But if happiness comes from within, if it is generated within, then it remains and it increases every day. And where is the source? Like there are certain simple ways of living, like with a certain discipline, yoga, and pranayam, and meditation, reading good books, walking in nature, listening to good music, and above all, looking at oneself, how these thoughts are arising, that can create happiness. And we can avoid watching films on internet which are very violent, and the discussion about politics, and people are getting involved in their views about politics or about anything, and then there is a fight starts, my view against your view, that creates unhappiness. So we can avoid many things, like avoid smoking, drinking, drugs, which create a lot of unhappiness. And how one can start if a person really wants to live a happy life, what a person can do. So what is required, which from my experience, I would say that one needs to be alone initially, and be relaxed and looking inward at how these thoughts are coming and going, without trying to change. Because this brings a knowledge, direct knowledge about how we create problem for ourselves, like getting angry. So at that time, when the anger is arising, can one look at it, that anger is arising? So this requires something, a kind of a freedom to look. And that what Krishnaji calls awareness, which is not in the field of thinking and feeling. So as long as that awareness has not awakened to look clearly at thoughts and feelings, we get entangled with thoughts and feelings. And those thoughts and feelings can create pleasure and pain and fear and many, many problems in relationship. And somebody has said, I think it was Pascal who said, all of our problems start from our inability to sit alone quietly in our room. And because our mind is such very chanchal, very, very restless, and it goes in its own momentum, and then it goes round and round. Like sometimes I tell about a rat trying to catch its own tail, and it has a short tail, and it is not able to catch, so it goes round and round. So our life is mostly going round and round in thinking and feeling, and in that there is no awareness which can look clearly at what is happening to ourselves, to our body, to our mind. Like many people, when they smoke or drink, they don't know what harm is being done to the body. And when we get angry, we don't know what harm it is doing to our body and mind. So there may be intellectual understanding many people have, like Duryodhan, he says, I know what is dharma and what is adharma, but I cannot live. So I think that is the difficulty with most people to really look at oneself in aloneness with silence. And you also said that looking silently, it is very frightening because in that silence is very unpleasant for most people because it is like a death. There is no I in that silence. And so it is like a psychological death. And people don't feel very happy to be alone, to be silent. So they are involving in many activities. And then the mind uh, gets involved in many, many problems which it creates. And somebody said there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way, you know. And it is possible for people who are really interested in freedom, freedom from pleasure and pain, to be in a state where there is this silence and there are no words, no sense of I. Uh, many people, I feel, in the past, they have been able to achieve such a state. And that is why, like Mirabai said, Ram Ratan Dhan Payo, a kind of a inner happiness, a treasure, kharche na kute, chor na lute, din din badat savayo. That it is a treasure which cannot be stolen by the world, and it increases every day. So it requires a different way of living with awareness, looking very clearly. And in that, there is real great beauty, love exists, which are not words, but it is a state of being in which we can look at nature with human beings without the previous knowledge which we gather. And so that is a kind of a freedom which is possible for human beings. So about the illusion, I forgot to say that in our traditional literature, there is something like a deer which is searching for some fragrance and it is running here and there to get that fragrance. But the deer did not know that it was coming from within itself. So true happiness, the real treasure is within us. But around this treasure, there are frightening things. And when we look inside, we look at those frightening things, unpleasant thoughts, feelings, and it's like a snakes. And we get frightened and we try to run outside like the deer which is running outside, to think that the treasure is getting money or fame, power, relationship, and all that. And and that is why Kabir said, "Tere paas हीरे मोती, मेरे मन मंदिर में ज्योति, कौन हुआ धनवान." So Kabir had that inner treasure, and it is buried in every human beings. Only people who are really not frightened to be alone, to direct the attention inward, not getting frightened by what they see, and just looking. That is a choiceless awareness. And when we begin to learn about all these things very, very clearly, that how unhappiness is created by us only, then this a creative source of happiness, which Krishna ji said, it is possible for human beings. So I have said enough things. Basically, I'm saying that, of course, we need a healthy body and healthy mind. These are essential things, because if our body and mind, they are not in a good state, then it is very difficult to be alone, to be silent, looking inward and seeing everything clearly without words. So then we can look at the birds in the sky or the clouds or sunrise, sunset, and everything becomes like a source of happiness. And but actually it is coming from within in how we look. And in such a looking, there is no observer. There is no observer, a kind of a unification between the observer and the observed. Only pure observation remains. And Krishnamurti's teachings are about coming to such a state where we are not searching for happiness also, but happiness is a byproduct of living healthy, happy, creative life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Sanjay sir wanted to ask a question. Please unmute and ask Sanjay.
Thank you, sir. Harshad ji,
Yes.
when you were speaking, I was listening, and when you were talking about awareness, a question came in my mind, and a few things followed. So I just want to share that. The question that came to my mind was that when we speak of awareness, is awareness a consistent state, or you see, because the natural tendency that the self tries to perpetuate itself by clinging to something, by grasping onto some thought, some idea. The self perpetuates itself by grasping. So to allow this awareness to be, it seems that one has to consistently make an effort to let go of whatever one is clinging to.
Yes. Yes, initially awareness comes and goes, but if that little bit awareness is really helping you to understand, and it creates happiness in relationship, then it gives you more energy to look again. And then after some time, you don't need to make any effort to be aware. It becomes like your nature. It's just like when we learn a language or music, initially we have to make effort to know many words. But after we learn the language, we are not making any effort to speak.
Yeah, but
It comes.
when I
Yeah.
was speaking of effort, I meant in the sense that when we become aware of any form of psychological grasping or holding on to any thought or concept or whatever it is, when you become aware of that, is that awareness itself enough, or does one have to make some amount of conscious effort to release that?
Well, when that awareness comes, which is not in the dimension of thinking and feeling, then that dissolves the problem, whatever problems are. Like as Krishnaji said, perception is the action. And he has also said, in the light of awareness, all problems created by thinking and feeling are dissolved. So it is a non-verbal state which can see clearly how unhappiness is created. So when it is seen non-verbally, then that becomes the action. And there is no need to suppress, no need to control, because there is no, this in awareness, there is no entity called I to suppress and control. Okay.
Thank you.
Shankar has
Can
to
you
ask.
hear me? Okay, you can continue, Mr. Kamlesh.
Shankarji, you can ask your question.
Okay, it's not a question. I'd like to put few more words to that, what they were saying. See, according to me, all this joy, pleasure, they're all created by thought. They're all imagination. They're not real, because once you give me some gift, I get joy or whatever. Immediately, if you take it back, I get so sad. It's all the mind. Mind is creating all this joy and all that. Even happiness is also not real. All these are words. That's all. What I feel is, the moment you see the falseness in the day-to-day concepts created by the society, the moment you see the falseness in your relationship, that my wife, my son, if you see the falseness in that, then the moment you see the falseness, you will get a lot of relief. The same kind, your relation with your car or the house, the moment you see the falseness, just like a man holding a tree and saying the tree is not leaving me, same like that, we are holding to all these people, we are holding to all this furniture, car, properties and all, and we are saying, it's naming it as relationship and all nonsense. So not only that, even in comparison, even feeling pride with the position we have, status or whatever. Even silly being a host of a Zoom meeting, we feel so proud. It is all rubbish. It's all thought created. So the moment you see that falseness, it is thought is making me feel bad. This thought is making me feel proud. This thought is making me feel attached to my son because it has given a name called son to the relationship. It has given a name called, the society has given a name called relationship. All these words are created by this thought. So once you can see that truth in day-to-day life, that is the real happiness. Even I should not use the word happiness even there. That's all. There's no word to that. Again, if you put happiness, you'll compare it with the happiness the one you get by selling a property. You get some 30 lakh profit. You compare with that. So it's not a happiness. It's a state. That's all. You cannot name it. This is what I want to add here. Thank you.
Yes, like the word you said, to see the falseness. So that thing doesn't happen as long as the sense of I wants to possess or want to be happy. As long as that I remains, that seeing the false as the false, it doesn't happen. So one has to come out from the thinking and feeling, and that is a seeing. And that really is the source. And happiness is a word. Of course, everything what we are speaking, all our words, the real is non-verbal. And this seeing is non-verbal.
And one more thing I want to add. See, in day-to-day life in society, what we are saying is, if a daughter's marriage is happening and you are not happy, you are normal. People say, hey, why are you not happy? Because the society has made this world so bad, they are forcing us, you have to be happy at this moment. You have to laugh, you have to smile. If you don't laugh also, they find fault with you. What's happening is, if somebody died in the family, even though you are not sad, you have to cry. You have to feel sad. This is all become a default behavior in the society has written this book. Okay, at this point you have to laugh. At this point you have to cry. So society is forcing us all this nonsense. So we have to see all this in our day-to-day life. Thank you.
Yeah, it requires a kind of the strength to stand alone, like Mirabai. And everybody said she was like a mad woman. She was singing and dancing with a sadhu and sannyasi. And she said, Lok Laj Kul ki Maryada ya mein ek na rakhungi. Very powerful words. She says, I don't care about family and society, what they think about me. I do what really makes me happy. So only when a person has such a strength to be alone, not be influenced by society, by family, then happiness is possible. Real, that non-verbal state. Like I myself, I don't attend marriages of my brothers, sisters, and I tell them very politely, will it be all right if I don't come? Because I don't like that atmosphere where there are so many people with all very glittering dress, everybody come. And I don't like to put on very glittering dress. So I don't feel a part of such a group. And then they say, yes, it is all right. We understand how you feel. So we don't have any problem. So when we have clarity and also humility to express, we don't need to be very proud. Then it is possible to communicate with people without creating conflicts. So my brother has a different way of living, and I am interested in different, but we are living together. And I don't try to tell him anything. He doesn't say anything. We can coexist properly if we are not interfering in each other's life. And we have clarity, then we have the freedom. Okay, I have said enough.
Thank you, sir. Can I request
Thank you.
Shakti ji to unmute and say something? Shakti ji, you wanted to say something? Shakti ji is not there?
Okay, before Shakti ji comes, I like to give you an image of what is illusion is. So there is one grill which is rotating, and a rat, when walks, the wheel rotates, and but the rat remains at the same place. But the rat feels that it is moving very, very fast, but actually the rat remains at one place, and the faster the rat tries, the faster the wheel rotates, but the rat remains at the same place. It is called hamster wheel. And so this illusion that by doing this thing or that thing, I can be happy, it is an illusion. And the more active we are, the maybe less happy we will be. So one has to really settle down. And when there is a clarity and silence, one can do many things. Studying, even for students, it becomes very efficient. Or even for social worker, if they don't have the sense of this I am doing, then they can do it in a much healthier way, and it will not create problem. Otherwise, even in social work, people are comparing and they have jealousy and many problems. Even in spiritual organizations, people have the desire to become somebody important, like Devdatta, who was with Buddha. And for 20 years, he was in the Sangha and he knew everything what Buddha was saying. And he could give speech like Buddha, but he had jealousy. So one can join any organization, spiritual, social, but as long as there is no clarity, there is no happiness. And with clarity, happiness can come in any field in which one is involved. Thank you.
Correct, sir. Pradeep Verma ji wants
Shakti
to
sir.
ask something.
The very fact, is it audible, sir?
Yes,
Audible, audible.
yes,
Quite audible. No problem. Vermaji, please go on.
The very fact that we have been discussing for the last number of years, the same topics, mostly subjective. Subjective in the sense you cannot challenge anyone that you do have it or you don't have it, or what degree you have it, like love, awareness, happiness, bliss, beyond, emptiness, suffering, clarity, synonyms and antonyms, and quoting people from here and there from history, we have been discussing for years together. It shows the futility of words, that they cannot communicate. And we say that in words that it cannot communicate, but still we go on do the same thing. Every alternate day we discuss in which category we will keep this, in happiness, pleasure, habit, whatever it is. But the very fact that we are discussing same topics again and again shows the limited deafness, or rather to convey message, something to convey something, but this doesn't happen. So this is what I feel. We are doing more of it. Can we have a different way of dialogue where we don't quote, where we tell our first-hand experience, where we come to the point straight? When we are discussing happiness, we should be around happiness only. So then only there is chance. Of course, receivers are important. The person who is listening is very important. That depends, again, subjectivity, again, individuality. So that's why the things are prolonged like this and nothing concrete happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vermaji.
yeah.
Harsh Tanka, sir. Harsh Tanka, sir.
Yes, can you hear me?
First person.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
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 Answer Vermaji's
Okay,
question first. Answer Vermaji's question first.
Yes, I am going to answer his question first. Yes. I actually agree with him. I would love to have that kind of discussion that he's talking about. And I have in my life had discussions like that. Dialogues they are really, when each of us is speaking directly from our own observation. Let me just say that it is very difficult. The primary difficulty is actually for a group of people to arrive at the same question in which they are understanding in the same way, so that there is one topic that is everybody is engaged in at the moment and they are ready to talk about at that moment. Many discussions that I have been in like that, it's only after an hour when the dialogue is about over that we arrive at that point where everyone is saying, okay, this is important. We want to find out about this. Let's all of us put our minds together and say what we are seeing about this thing. And even reaching that point where everybody's mind is tuned to the same question is actually quite an achievement in a dialogue. And then to be able to proceed from there, as you say, then we could arrive at something. And one of the criteria I have, still answering your question, for such a dialogue is that it should change me, that when I leave the dialogue, I'm not quite the same as when I entered the dialogue, because I saw something new, I saw something firsthand. And as we have been saying, when you perceive something, just the seeing of it changes it. So that is, so I commend your question, I think, but particularly on Zoom, it's very difficult to do. It's difficult enough when you're sitting with a group of people and you can look at them, you can understand how they're using their word from nonverbal clues. You can understand, because not everybody uses words in the same way. So to reach a point of understanding with each other and focus on the same question is, I've found very difficult in this format of the Zoom, when I can't even see anybody else, when I can't see what your reaction to what I'm saying is, whether you're understanding what I'm saying, whether, that's how we communicate. So it's very difficult to have that kind of dialogue in this format. This is one thing I would say. And immediately saying that in
Yeah, may I say something?
yeah.
Okay. When we focus on any particular question, then we go in certain direction. In my life, I have not focused on any question. I am interested in looking whatever is happening, and that is revealing itself. So Krishnaji asked many questions, and he has been having dialogues with people for 50 years, but still people have not changed much. And he also felt that there has been not much listening. So real listening is much more important. And that can happen not only during the dialogue, but throughout the day, what is going on inside us. Without asking question, is it possible to look at what is and how it is moving from one thought to another thought and just moving with it? That's what Krishnaji calls choiceless awareness. And that is what interests me very much. But here in a group, I think we are interested in some particular thing, particular topic. And so then we have to go in a particular direction. Chidanandji, would you like to say something?
Yes, yes, yes. We all get a little uneasy when either on one hand too much of material is quoted, or on the other somebody is saying he is speaking from his own experience. At times gets very unclear and we don't know what he is saying. So other factors being equal, there is no doubt if someone can share one's own, life, how one sees, that is definitely better. Yeah. Quoting and bookish knowledge always has a lot of sad limitations. I do agree.
Sir, I would like to say something here. Hello.
Please do.
Yeah, yes.
So every thought has got a center in itself, and also the subject becomes the center of that thought. So the thought should also be complete in itself. If the thought is complete about that particular subject, then that will drop automatically, isn't it? Suppose I am complete with the subject, then there is no point, the thought will not arise at all on that. Even K has pointed out that thing, that you have to pursue the thought till end on a particular subject.
Yeah.
What do you have to say?
If
As
I
here,
un-
Vermaji also indicated in indirect way the same thing. Now the mind has come to a conclusion or to a state where the words are not required. When the words are not required, thought will automatically drop, isn't it?
but thoughts will keep on coming. But it is possible to look.
Yeah, but they will not be that harmful, or that they will not be that loaded. What?
Yeah. The important thing is this awareness, which
Yes.
can look at thoughts clearly.
Yes.
Thought is not an enemy of man, as Krishnaji said. I don't feel that thinking is an enemy of thinking.
Sir,
Will come and go. Yeah.
Sir, here I would like to point out that you always insist for the looking. But
Yeah,
if the thought is loaded, can one be aware all the time and remain in that state? As you said that he has to sit in a room or become isolated. But if he is moving in the society, and if the thought is loaded, then can one be remain aware all the time? That is the question.
Yeah. Initially,
Thought has
one
to-
has to be alone.
Sir,
Initially,
thought
one has
has
to
to-
be alone.
So
sir,
one,
sir, please,
one has to have
Vagmare,
clear thought.
Vagmare, please keep silence, because Hassar Parik and then two persons are waiting for question.
Okay, sir.
Please.
Okay.
Yes. Initially, yes, one has to be alone and silent and looking. But later on, one doesn't need to be, one can go anywhere, travel in the train, talk with people, or with students, or other many dialogues. In that, there is no effort involved in being aware. Yeah, it is your nature. It becomes.
So these dialogues are important or not?
Sir,
Because
sir,
Vermaji
sir,
pointed
sir,
out
please,
that it is not
please,
important.
Vagmare, sir, please let others also ask, please,
Okay,
please,
okay.
sir. Be,
No issues.
Harsh Tanka, sir, you wanted to say something?
Yes,
Yeah, please,
I want to
please
come
go
at,
ahead.
I want to come at this
You
from
are
a
a
different.
speaker. You are a speaker, so please go ahead. And then Sanjay.
Okay,
I
can
will
you hear me?
increase the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes,
We
sir.
are able to hear you.
See, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name of the person whose question I was answering about dialogue. Can we focus on
Pradeep.
something? Yeah.
Pradeep Verma.
Vermaji,
Verma.
yes. And he said something interesting. He said, then we can talk about happiness and go to the very end of something. And while I like the idea of going to very end, this illustrates the difficulty, because should we be talking about happiness at all? Everything that we have been saying, even our questions about what's it like? What is the quality of happiness? How can we, by paying attention, maybe we will reach happiness? Even the statement that perhaps we can be connected to the source of happiness at the same time as we are teaching a subject in the classroom begs the question, makes our mind think, so how can I be in that state so that I can be able to be in touch with the source of happiness? So our minds are very clever. They're very deceptive. They're very sneaky. They will turn this into, this is still pursuit of happiness. This is still our focus on happiness. All of this is still about happiness. So, and I know you don't like quotations from Krishnamurti, but let me quote Krishnamurti. He says, what is the good of my asking if there is happiness when I'm suffering? Right? So what is important is not if there is happiness, but from the very beginning to inquire what is suffering and to stay with that till the right answer comes. So if Vermaji wanted to talk about happiness, the first thing I would say is, no, let's talk about suffering in our dialogue and see if we can take, in our dialogue, take the question of suffering to the very end, and not in some subtle way as some technique for achieving happiness, because that's another trick our mind will play on us. This is now the technique for achieving happiness, that we look at. No, we genuinely look at what is, which is of course what, and as Harshaji points out, with a quality of awareness that is free of thought, that we look at, inquire into suffering, inquire, until we reach, until, as Krishnaji says, the right answer comes. He doesn't quite say what the right answer is. He just says the right answer comes. So I think
Sanjay.
Yes, I would like to respond to the last 3 or 4 speakers, that is Pradeep ji, Dinesh ji, and I'm sorry if I'm missing one person. But anyway, I'll just get to it. You see, I'm going to refer a little bit to my professional training over here. There's a reason why. You see, in 2000, I used to be a teacher. I think there are many teachers in this group. I used to be a teacher. Then I switched over to mental health profession. So when I was doing my degree in psychology, in psychological counseling and well-being, we were taught a very, very important thing, because listening is very important in this profession. So one very important thing we were taught, that there is no such thing as should. The word should not be there only. So Krishna ji also said this, that who is there to tell you what you should do? So many of you asked the question, many of us, we asked this question, that we should discuss in this manner, or we should reach a conclusion. But who is there to tell us what we should do? The word should implies an authority. It may be me, it may be another person, but should means there is an authority. That means someone is superior, someone is inferior, somebody is telling the other person, you should do like this or you should do like that. So in that kind of a situation, there is no freedom. Now, the other thing is, we should reach a conclusion. Why should we reach a conclusion? See, the thing is that if we want to reach a specific conclusion, we will definitely reach that conclusion. If I have an idea that this is what happiness is, and the discussion goes in that direction, and I reach that conclusion, then I'm very happy. Yes, this is what I thought it was, and I have got there. But the idea is to be able to discuss it without any conclusion. Even the need for conclusion. Why do I need to conclude? Because I feel insecure. I feel that I need a conclusion. Then there is some security. Okay, I know this. But it is important to allow oneself to be in a state of not knowing. I mean, not knowing in terms of verbally or defining, but having an experiential knowledge of it rather than something that is defined by thought. So I think we have to keep the word should out of the picture, because the moment the word should comes, authority comes, division comes, should and should not comes. The opposite of should is should not. So all this will come. And again, also conclusion, like Harshadji was saying a while ago, that the conclusion, in the process of this discussion, we become aware of many things. Sometimes we want to prove our point. We become aware of that. Yes, I want to say something. The I is very strong there. And then supposing I have a thought and I listen to someone, I become aware that I'm not listening to the other person. Actually, I'm constantly replaying my thought in my head. I'm waiting for my turn to speak. And when it comes, I will say what I want to say. So in the process, what happens is that if we are aware of all this, then it leads to a lot of learning, not necessarily to a conclusion, but definitely to some form of development. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Shaktiji, you wanted to comment? Because I requested you, but somehow I could not. Shaktiji, you are here?
He is unmuted.
Yeah.
Yeah, please, Shaktiji, go ahead. You are again muted. Please unmute and say. Shaktiji, please unmute and say. Unmute first. Shaktiji, unmute first. Shaktiji, unmute first or write in the chat box.
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. Now we can listen. Please,
Yeah.
please go on. Repeat it, whatever you are saying.
Yeah, I am saying that. I am saying, sir, there is nothing specific to say. And so because the time is also almost over.
Yeah, it's 6 minutes over.
Yeah.
That's okay, fine.
Thank you.
Fine
Thank
with
you very
us.
much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Varmaji, still you wanted to ask anything or suggest anything? Varmaji wanted to suggest anything? You are not, you are not, please unmute and then say. Please unmute and then say. Pradeep Varmaji, Dr. Pradeep Varmaji, now say. You wanted to say something?
What Bal Chandra
First
ji
and
said,
something? First
अभी
and
इन्होंने
something?
Bal Chandra ji ने जो बोला, it's very true that we are not for conclusions, but we are definitely for we have awareness of the energies depleting through me, whether it is depleting or conserving. So that makes you aware what is happening through you, around you. So the energy budgeting is very important. If we go on discussing habitually and go on quoting habitually, the depletion is there. You get fed up. As Krishnamurti said, if you take a mantra and go on do it, these are different mantras in different forms. They appear to be different, but they are the same thing. Because his teachings remain right from 34 to this last 86. His teachings were same. The only words had changed. Now dissecting words is our job, subjectivity. So that is what I have to say. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. You have quoted again Krishnamurti for mantra.
Because
You have quoted Krishnamurti again for mantra. Something happens.
Because he is considered authority. He is
Yes.
considered authority.
Okay. Chidanandji, please conclude and finish it. Because it is already 7:38.
We have a
My
new
energy level
rule
has
here.
gone.
We shouldn't quote Krishnamurti.
Please conclude. Chidanandji, please conclude if he is very much there.
Sushil ji, I
Yeah.
think what Pradeep ji is saying is valid, because Chidanand ji also agreed with you. He said that, yes, I think we should engage in more personal observations and personal experience and dialogue rather than quoting.
So,
I think he
No,
did.
I am interested only in first hand. And
Actually, I
first hand I wanted to say, please close it. It is 7:38.
Okay, okay.
7:38. I was supposed to close it 7:30, but I have increased it for 8 minutes for getting something first hand.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Verma ji. Thank you, all participants and guests.
आधा मिनट नहीं दोगे अब तुम? आधा मिनट.
Sir, आधा मिनट आपके लिए. First hand, if you say something first hand, I can give. And please don't quote anybody, please.
नहीं, not at all.
Quote
मैं
yourself.
ये क्योंकि I was not emphasizing on personal experiences. I was telling
Yeah.
if you are investigating, all of us, the people who are in dialogue, if they are investigating the same problem, so that togetherness, that energy is used to come to some, not necessarily consensus, but some understanding. So that is what it is.
Yeah.
Not personal experiences are not
Yeah.
that many important. Thank you.
No. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
My first hand saying is that please close it. Please close it. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks to everybody.